Prime Minister Netanyahu, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure. Welcome.
So,
Wait a minute. Wait a minute. I have to tell you something before I go into this. You're from Philadelphia.
I am from Philadelphia.
I spent some years in Philadelphia.
I know, in Overbrook.
Now, I don't want to intervene in your football politics, but I understand that the Eagles made it to the Super Bowl.
We did make it to the Super Bowl.
I offer you my personal congratulations. Now ask me anything you want.
All right, thanks. You're trying to butter me up a little bit.
Yes, of course I am.
But let's turn to a more serious subject, because we're speaking at a rather perilous time, it feels like, in this region right now. One of the bloodiest months that Israel and the region has seen in years and years. There were 7 Israelis shot outside a synagogue, at the entrance of a synagogue on Friday, International Holocaust Remembrance Day. That was one day after 10 Palestinians were killed after a raid in the West Bank, during a raid in the West Bank in Jenin. You promised a strong and swift response to the shooting of the Israelis. How worried are you about everything just spiraling out of control, as we have unfortunately seen happen in the past?
Look, I think there's always a danger of that, and I do everything in my power to contain it. I can tell you that the last 10 years during which I was prime minister were the safest and quietest in Israel's history. But periodically we had to take swift and strong action against the terrorists. I don't believe in collective punishment, but I believe in focused action, both against the terrorists themselves. This action that you referred to was action against intelligence that gave us a ticking bomb, a terrorist outfit that was out to murder Israelis, and happily we knocked them out. Unfortunately, one woman was killed in the crossfire.
A civilian?
A civilian. But what we've encountered in the last 2 years, including in the outgoing government, was a doubling of terrorist attacks from the Palestinian areas, because the Palestinian Authority was not really exercising its power to fight the terrorists. So the Israeli army had to come in. And we had to come in the last few weeks too. I'm taking targeted action against the terrorists, their immediate circle of supporters who were involved in helping them do the terror acts, or celebrated with fireworks and candies and other things that after the terrorist act. So we think that if we take targeted action on the terrorists and their immediate circle, this can actually lower the incentive for what we call lone terrorists. They're not lone, they're within a context. And so you want to target them, but keep the economy going, keep 150,000 Palestinians working in Israel. I haven't closed it even for a minute, and I don't intend to.
So right now, everyone in the region, especially allies like Secretary of State Blinken and others, are calling for everyone to bring down the temperature. The Security Council of Israel met Saturday and announced a number of measures, including strengthening settlements, more punishment of family members of terrorists, which I think you were alluding to a degree there, and other measures. And I'm wondering, did Secretary Blinken express to you whether he thought those measures would actually bring the temperature down or actually exacerbate it?
Well, he certainly said what I agree with, that we should do everything in our power to de-escalate, which we will. But it's not targeting family members. It's targeting family members who were involved in the terror acts or supported it after the act was done. And I think you have to understand, these terrorists are then celebrated, are paid by the Palestinian Authority, pay for slay. The more they murder, the more they get paid. And their family members who supported the terrorism get Social Security benefits and other things. That's what we targeted. And I think that disincentivizes the terrorists. As far as what they really want is they want to uproot us. And I said that you're not going to uproot us. We're here to stay, including in these Jewish communities in the territories that they want to uproot. That's not going to happen. So I want to disincentivize them. And believe me, I've used this tactic over the years, and my record is actually the best record of any Israeli prime minister or of any government in containing it. It's going to be tough. It's not going to be easy, but I think with I would say a judicious use of force and the willingness to cooperate with the Palestinian Authority on security matters, I think we can control it, and that's my hope. I hope we succeed. We have in the past, we should now.
So you were just referred to Jewish communities in the West Bank, and I know that there is concern in the Biden administration and in the Western world about some of those communities. I don't know which ones specifically you're talking about, but some of them are illegal, and there are concerns about expanding some of those settlements, about annexing land. What did Secretary Blinken say to you about that? Because my impression is that the Biden administration, and certainly he said this publicly when he met with you earlier, is worried about that and worried about that bringing Israel on a path where peace is never going to be possible.
Well, I totally disagree, because I think that the fact that we're here and our people, the Jewish people, have been here for 3,500 years. The fact that Jews live here and will continue to live here, and Palestinians will continue to live here, and we're going to have to live together. We're not going to ethnically cleanse the heartland of the Jewish people. We're not going to ethnically cleanse Israel. 20% of Israel's population is Arabs. We're not going to say we're not going to have peace until we kick out the Arabs from Israel, and we're not going to have peace until we kick out the Jews from these areas which are disputed. They're not illegal. They're disputed areas, and the only way to resolve that dispute is to have peace negotiations with the Palestinians consistently refuse to enter. Now, I think we can get hung up on this, and we have in the past. People said, unless you resolve this issue and unless you have peace with the Palestinians, you're not going to have a broader peace with the Arab world. So for 25 years, the Palestinians who don't want peace with Israel want to see a peace without Israel, who don't want a state next to Israel, but a state instead of Israel. They had an effective veto on Israel's expansion of the peace, circle of peace around it. I went around them. I went directly to the Arab states and forged with a new concept of peace for peace, peace through strength. I forged 4 historic peace agreements.
The Abraham Accords.
The Abraham Accords, which is twice the number of peace agreements that all my predecessors in 70 years got combined.
Well, let me ask you about, because I know you're so committed to the Abraham Accords, which are a huge achievement by President Trump and by you. And I know you want to keep going. What happens when, let's say the big prize is, I know Sudan's on the table, some of these Southeastern Asian countries are on the table, but the big prize is Saudi Arabia, obviously. What happens when Saudi Arabia gets the U.S. to go along with some of the things that they want from the U.S. in terms of security measures, but they say, look, Prime Minister Netanyahu, they probably call you Bibi, I need something for the Palestinians in order to go along with this. I can't just do this around the Palestinians. That's important to me and to my constituency. What are you willing to give? Are you willing to let people in the West Bank vote? Are you willing to let the 300,000 Arabs who have residency in East Jerusalem vote?
Well, I'm certainly willing to have them have all the powers that they need to govern themselves, but none of the powers that can threaten us. And this means that Israel should have the overriding security responsibility, because every time we moved out, say from Lebanon, basically Iran came in with its proxy Hezbollah. We moved out of Gaza. Another radical Islamist, the Hamas, took over. And if we just walk away, as people suggest, then you'll have Hamas and Iran move into the hills around Jerusalem, overlooking Tel Aviv. So I think there's a formula for peace, but my view is, because of the fact that the persistent Palestinian refusal, which goes back a century, to recognize a Jewish state, a nation state for the Jewish people in any boundary, that persistent refusal persists. If we wait for them, we're not going to have peace. People said you have to work your way outside in, first inside out. First, peace with the Palestinians, peace with the Arab world. I think realistically it's going to be the other way around.
But
if we make peace with Saudi Arabia, it depends on the Saudi leadership, and bring effectively the Arab-Israeli conflict to an end, I think we'll circle back to the Palestinians and get a workable peace with the Palestinians. I think that's possible, and I think that's the way to go.
Is it a two-state solution?
Well, I wouldn't call it necessarily that, because I don't think that, I had a discussion with my friend of 40 years. I'm not just saying that. Friend of 40 years, Joe Biden, I mean that. Personal friend of 40 years and a friend of Israel. A real champion of Israel and of Zionism. And I told him what I just told you. I said, look, any final agreement between Israel and the Palestinians would have Israel controlling security, overriding security responsibility in the area west of the Jordan, that includes both the Palestinian areas and the Jewish areas, the Israeli areas, which is, by the way, the size of the Washington Beltway, the width of the Washington Beltway. I said, you can't divide who controls the airspace. You have to cross it. It takes 2 minutes for an airplane to cross it. So what, 1 minute Israel controls it and the other minute the Palestinians? Of course, it's not workable. He said to me, as others have said to me, but that's not perfect sovereignty. And I said, you're right. But I don't know what you call it, but it gives them the opportunity to control their lives, to elect their officials, to run their economy, to run their institutions, to have their flag and to have their parliament. But we have to have overriding security control. And I think that's the way we're going to end up But I don't think we're going to end up now because the Palestinians refuse to negotiate a real peace. And the reason, and that's not because of me. For many years, people said I was the obstacle to peace. Well, I was removed. They had Barak come in as prime minister. They had Omar come in as prime minister. Sharon before that, and Peres, and before me, and Rabin before me. And none of them succeeded because of this persistent obstacle. So I think that if we want to go into a rabbit's hole and try to resolve that and avoid going to the Arab world, I think we should go to the Arab world. I leave myself open to a negotiation with the Palestinians at any time. But I think that the way we're going to succeed is not let the Palestinian tail wag the body of the Arab world, get the peace with the Arab world, and get the more recalcitrant Palestinians moved out, not moved out physically, but moved out from dominating the political scene. You'll have the Israeli public with an outstretched hand for a real peace.